Pore space, we discovered last night that there's some ramifications and some issues that we need to dig deeper before we do anything. That was better to do a good job than a quick bill that has issues. So we're going to push that one to the interim for an interim study so we can determine all of the legal ramifications of what we're trying to do with the pore spaces. So that being said, we won't bring up 193. The other issue is I've got to be in judiciary at 9 o'clock for a personal bill. And the bills that have been on notice, the other bills, two of them are the vice chair's bills. And so he cannot chair while he's presenting his own bills. So, and I did a little research into the rules. No one else can chair but the chairman and the vice chairman. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with Vice Chair Tarver's bills, and then when I have to leave for the other committee, we'll bring up 59, and Vice Chair Tarver can chair the committee for that bill. So apologize, we can't do anything else because we've advertised. You have to advertise or provide notice a day in advance what bills we'll be treating. So I can't bring any other bills up because we have not provided notice. So with that, Mark, would you call the roll, please?
Representative Campbell.
Present.
Representative Knapp.
Here.
Representative Larson.
Here.
Representative Lawley.
Here.
Representative Riggins.
Excused, I'm sorry.
Representative Schmidt.
Here.
Representative Tarver.
Here.
Representative Weber.
Here.
Chairman Heiner.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, committee members. We will start with House Bill 161, hydrogen severance tax. Vice Chair Tarver, would you please take the hot seat? Again, I apologize that we had to change the agenda for today.
Chairman, committee, I'm here to bring you House Bill 161.
Vice Chair, would you introduce yourself for the record?
Reuben Tarver, House District 52. I'm here to bring you House Bill 161. It's a hydrogen severance tax bill. It's actually pretty short and sweet. It just provides the language so we can tax produced water or fresh water. And would you like me to walk through the bill?
Please.
Okay.
Don't read the bill to us, just
skim it.
yeah.
All right, so basically, first page just tells us what we're gonna be doing in the bill. Page 2, the definition of hydrogen and also the definition of hydrogen production. How we're gonna tax it is in there. Page 3, who's gonna be taxed? The people that are producing the hydrogen from the severed, molecules that fall off of the water. Tax rate, I'm sure there's gonna be some discussion on that. Page 4, compliance, enforcement. Pretty simple. Stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Representative Tarver. Committee members, are there any questions for the good representative? Let's start right here. Boy, saddle up, here we go.
Bring it. Let's go.
Representative Knapp.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Representative Tarver, just for the public and the record, the tax rate resulting from production. So you've got two different tax rates, basically. One is a byproduct water at 3%, and one is a produced from water, which is at a severance rate of 6%. Can you just explain those percentages and the difference between the two?
Representative Tarver.
Chairman, Representative Knapp, so the difference is to encourage producers of hydrogen to use the produced water versus using our fresh water. And that was mainly the incentive there. Produced is a byproduct that is, we consider waste, and it would be nice if we, this might help get rid of some of that. What was the thoughts behind that?
Follow up? Representative Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Tarver. I had a couple of different questions. Where did you come up, first of all, with the severance tax rate of 6%? Because I'm looking at, I'm just trying to equate that in my mind. A kilogram of hydrogen is the equivalent of a gallon of gas. So how is that comparable? I'm simply asking because I do not know there. Is it an apple for an apple? And then when we're just talking all hydrogens produced from water, because I believe there's 4 different hydrogen types that are produced from water. So I very much agree with what you're doing here. There's 12 different types of hydrogen. Each type of hydrogen is given a color code based off of the feedstock that's used to produce it and the process used to produce it. So what I'm seeing here is like for California, pardon me, they're mainly interested in blue hydrogen and green hydrogen. So basically, we're incentivizing, which I agree with here, to use production water rather than using water from our aquifers or our lakes and such like that, correct?
Representative Tarver.
Chairman, Representative Campbell, that's 100% correct, and it's obvious by your questioning, you know more about hydrogen than I do, but this bill is specific to water, and that's really the only intent I had with this bill.
Yeah, that's the clarification.
Representative Campbell, through the chair, please. Representative Tarver, please continue. Were you done? Okay. Representative Campbell.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. I just wanted to make that clear line of delineation there. So yes, I like this, but I'm just wondering if we shouldn't include, because I think that would apply mostly to blue hydrogen and green hydrogen, but I like it very much. No more further questions.
Thank you. Any other questions for Representative Tarver? Representative, I have a couple of questions. You're taxing this similar to natural gas. What is the severance tax rate on natural gas?
Thanks for the question, Chairman. I don't know. I'm assuming, I couldn't tell you. I'd be guessing. I'm gonna say 6. Is that a good one?
Is that true? Okay, all right. Good guess.
And Mr. Chairman, that's really why I chose 6 too. I mean, all industries we're trying to get level and fair and equitable, and I think we heard a lot about that yesterday, and so that's where the 6 came from.
All right, thank you very much. The other question I have, Representative, is on page 4, it talks about exemptions for taxation are the same as for natural gas. Can you explain what those exemptions are for natural gas?
No, Mr. Chairman, I cannot.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the representative? Seeing none, thank you. Would you care to rejoin us up here? Open it up to any elected officials in the room. Seeing none available. Departments of the state. Any departments of the state that would like to weigh in on this? Good morning, welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Matt Sachet, I'm the Administrator of the Mineral Tax Division of the Department of Revenue. There are some concerns that I'd like to bring up just with this bill, specifically with the administration of it. To begin with, just an overall statement, if I may. This would be the first time we would be applying a severance tax to something that is not taxable at the point of severance. Water is not taxable at the point of severance. So if I were to drink this water, I would not have taxes. If I were to turn this water into hydrogen, it would be taxable. That becomes quite a conflict, and I'm not entirely sure how we would administer that without further discussion. Specifically though, with the administration of this bill, there are, as was identified, there are two types, the byproduct water and then water that's produced. The byproduct water would be perfect to administer. We'll just use the natural gas. We'll treat it as it's a component of natural gas. For example, the way we treat ethane or propane out of the natural gas stream. If it comes out of a oil production, we would treat it in the same manner that we would treat associated gas that comes out of oil production, so that would be perfectly fine. The issue is for water that's just produces water. That's where we have an issue, and probably the most important issue is there's no point of valuation. In natural gas valuation, the point of valuation is probably the most important single item. It determines what can be deducted from value off the sales value and what is not deductible off the sales value. Within the natural gas statutes, the dehydrator is the point of valuation in almost all instances. If there's no dehydrator, this legislature has determined a compressor, transportation, or a transfer meter, custody transfer meter may be used if you don't have a dehydrator. In this instance, I am unaware that there are going to be any of those things in the process to create hydrogen. Being a future technology, I'm not really sure what exactly, if they're going to measure it at all. And that is quite important to the department, that we get something in there. If this body wishes to make it just the wellhead, that's fine, but it needs to be, we would need to identify it in there so that we have direction as to what is allowed and what is not allowed as deductible. And I believe, yes, I believe that's really all we have for this. I will stand for questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Sachet. Anyone for questions? Representative Larson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Director, thank you so much for being here. And I just wanted to ask a question. We're having discussions about production taxes in certain areas for bills and stuff. Would a production tax be better rather than a severance tax for administration purposes? So produced hydrogen based off of the water consumed. We could do a production on that end of things, or would you rather just tweak the language to make it more clear for severance? What's easier for the department to administer?
Director?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, we consider the severance to be a production tax. Severance and ad valorem are both considered production taxes. However, I have spoken with Mr. Fanning of the sales tax group, and we discussed that perhaps this would be better put somewhere over there into the sales tax as opposed to a severance tax, because once again, what you're producing, what's being severed from the ground, is not taxable at the point of severance. And so if you're wanting to tax hydrogen, maybe something to that effect would be a little bit better, more appropriate. But that is, of course, up to this body.
Follow-up? Representative Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Am I understanding this, that perhaps rather than trying to define the water as the feedstock, it would be easier to identify what type of hydrogen we're producing by color code? Am I catching that correctly? Or can we simply, quick follow-up, can we simply just put from the wellhead and clarify everything at that point forward?
Director Sachet?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, the point of valuation is a valuation issue. It determines how we're going to value that. So identifying the wellhead is a great way of handling that, just identifying it. As for the severance tax, it being a non-taxable mineral when it comes out of the ground and then becomes taxable later, that's different, and that's honestly beyond my scope. That's just a concern I have.
Follow up, Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, that was kind of where I was trying to go, is it possible to have two different categories of water? Water that we drink that's free, as opposed to water that comes from a wellhead? Because I'm seeing people that have water rights, that own water. Perhaps they may want to sell some of their water allotment for the production of hydrogen. That would not be coming from a wellhead. But are you seeing where I'm going, to where there could be from the wellhead and natural? They're two different distinctions of water. Is that possible? I know it's getting kind of twilight zone, but there's some weird things happening here.
Director Sachet?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, I believe that in the bill, hydrogen production is defined as being produced from the ground. So I think it's required to be produced from the ground for it to be hydrogen production at the beginning.
Further follow-up?
Okay, if we were creating the hydrogen from hydrocarbons, let's say we're using the methane from natural gas as a feedstock instead of water, there would be a severance tax associated with that, correct?
Director Sachet?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, yes, the mineral being severed from the ground is taxable at the point of severance. So natural gas and all of its components would be taxable.
Well, I'm just trying to get
Through the chair, please.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I'm trying to get my head around it because we have 12 different classifications of hydrogen that come from, the feedstock can be water, which, as we're discussing, or it can be from methane, which is severance, no problem with the severance tax. They're both being used as a feedstock, be it the methane from the natural gas or water. So I'm trying to look at how we can separate that out, because they're both feedstocks. It depends, the feedstock and the method of process is what defines your hydrogen. So it's hard for me to imagine a feedstock that can't have a severance tax to a feedstock that does. I'm just having a real hard time. Maybe we might have to define that. Have to define them out by classes of hydrogen in order to separate the two feedstocks. Does that make sense?
Director?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, as Representative Tarver said, you clearly know more about hydrogen than I do. All I know is how this current bill fits with the current statutes. And that's what I've brought up here. I really don't know the technical aspects of the feedstock coming from water versus coming from natural gas.
Okay, we're going to go online. Representative Riggins is online. Good morning. You have any questions?
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I would ask the director, how is this going to impact just standard disposal water? For example, natural gas processing, you have produced water as a byproduct of it. So if you have this tax on this particular project, are you gonna be taxed even if you haven't really produced it? Because you're getting rid of that severed product now as in disposal. Is that gonna have any impact on that type of activity?
Director Sachet?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Riggins, the, it would have no impact on disposal of water because you would have to actually create hydrogen before it would be taxable. And if you were to create hydrogen out of what would be disposal water, the revenue associated with that hydrogen production would be included as a value in the natural gas, and the processing associated with turning that water into hydrogen would be allowed as a deduction from that revenue that you're getting from the natural gas. However, if you are taking your disposal water and just putting it in a disposal pit and allowing it to evaporate, that would have no effect on this.
Follow-up, Representative Riggins?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Any further questions for the Director? Director, I've got one or two questions. I'm familiar with some natural gas wells that the natural gas will not even burn when it comes out of the wellhead because of other components in the gas. So there's no value there. It will not even burn. But then it goes through a refinery or processing plant and you extract the small components that are there and it becomes valued. And so the point of valuation is very, very important. And that's something that's been discussed and argued for decades in the processing of natural gas and oil and all those things, where that valuation is. So if we did a point of valuation at the custody transfer meter at the tailgate of a processing plant that creates this hydrogen out of water, that creates some issues, granted, but upstream, if a plant is making hydrogen out of produced water, I can envision that they will have an alternative source of fresh water to make up their feedstocks should they not have a sufficient amount of water for some reason. So the feedstock could be from multiple sources. And you got one source being taxed at 6%, another source being taxed at 3%. Where that point of valuation is, we haven't determined that yet. But I can see this as opening up a can of worms and something that's going to be discussed in your department quite extensively in the future as we create a taxation on hydrogen. Are you familiar with any other locations any other states where they tax hydrogen and where their point of valuation is?
Mr. Chairman, I do not know that, no.
Okay, thank you. Because hydrogen is being produced and it's being made through electrolysis or whatever the process they choose. So maybe there's some research we need to do to find out how they do the taxation on that. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that would be an absolutely a good starting point, was to get some research a little bit more on the types of hydrogen that Representative Campbell has brought up and other states and how they're valuing this to get a guideline to how we should start.
Thank you. Any other? Representative Campbell.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to say you guys had put in, the state of Wyoming had put in for a hydrogen hub. We might look to some of these hydrogen hubs around us, such as one in the Dakotas, and see how they look at that, maybe for some guideline.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Director. Any other departments of the state that would like to testify? Seeing none, any citizens that have attended here in the meeting that would like to testify? Mr. Winnie, thank you for being here. State your name for the record, please.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Bill Winnie, Sublette County. I'd like to turn your glasses around a minute and look at it from an engineering perspective, because you're wrapped up in where it came from, and so on. And in the submarine world, we have oxygen generators. They produce hydrogen, which we simply dispose of. Your hospitals probably have similar method of producing oxygen for medicinal purposes. And I don't know what they do with the hydrogen, but they probably just let it go off into the atmosphere. Hydrogen is a gas, and it becomes saleable at some point, motor fuel or so on we've heard about. And it just strikes me as I listen to all the discussion I just heard here that at the point where it becomes purified, and that's the issue, we do use hydrogen in a submarine in other places, but it's chemically pure, and we do not use what comes out of the generators, oxygen generators, because of that issue of purity. So it just strikes me, if you want to tax hydrogen, you look at it as a fuel or motor fuel or something like that and tax it at the point in the generation process where it becomes a saleable item. Subject to your questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winnie. Any questions for Mr. Winnie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Winnie, so you're saying, just repeat what you just said there again, because I think you're dialed in on something really at the end.
What I was talking about is where in the production process of hydrogen, gaseous hydrogen that can then be sold maybe as a motor fuel, there's a point in that process where the purity makes it saleable. And that was my thought. It's like I said, in the submarine world, we produce hydrogen. It is not of the quality that we would use in those places where we do use gaseous hydrogen. And so we simply vent it overboard. So that's my point. When that point of purity makes it saleable, I submit to you that maybe that's where you want to place your tax.
Representative Campbell.
Yeah, water is easily transported. Hydrogen is not easily transported. It's not a very stable fuel. So I like this idea and the simple fact that be it water or natural gas, both of those commodities are very easily transported. And so it would be at the location, at the site of processing that the taxation would occur. I think that is a very viable thing to look at, Mr. Chairman.
Is that a question, Representative?
What is your thoughts? Is that being a viable consideration as far as how to tax this?
Mr. Winnie.
I'm not sure I followed the question very well. Could I ask Representative Campbell to repeat it or perhaps condense it?
Mr. Representative Campbell, would you?
Thank you,
restate the
Mr.
question?
Chair. What I'm saying is, I like the idea of the point of origin where the hydrogen is actually produced because regardless of what you use as a feedstock, be it water or methane from whatever source, methane, water, all that's easy to get to the process point. So I think that where the actual hydrogen is produced is the point where we should look to start taxation at, because that is where the actual transformation occurs. That's where we're going from water to hydrogen. That's where we're going from methane to hydrogen. Whatever our feedstock, that is the point that we are transferring from one product to another product. So I think that would be a good place to look at as a start of taxation. Would you agree?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Winnie.
Representative Campbell, if I understand, you're talking about taxing it in the production process, and that's a slightly different spin that I had. My point was there's a production process point where the purity makes it a saleable item. The chemical purity that it is, other constituents that might have been entrained have been, what should I say, washed out or removed, and therefore it then becomes saleable. It has a certain amount of energy that can be equated to gasoline or diesel or coal or whatever. And I think what you're doing when you want to put a severance tax on it, you're trying to really, in effect, tax the energy that it provides. That's what you do with coal and oil and so on. And so somewhere in that production process, and it's probably close to the wellhead or whatever it is, and I can't claim to be very familiar with wellheads, so bear with me. But at some point, it has become a saleable item. And that's the point that just strikes me from an engineering perspective that you would want to impose the tax.
All right, thank you, Mr. Weenie. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Any other citizens in the room? Seeing none, anyone that's representing businesses that would like to testify? Mr. Obermuller, thank you for being here. Your jet lag is worn off?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Appreciate seeing all of you this morning. Pete Obermuller, President of the Petroleum Association of Wyoming. I guess the jet lag hasn't worn off, Mr. Chairman. With me is Shane Schultz. He'll introduce himself and talk about who he represents in a moment. I just want to, a couple things. With a little trepidation, because I really I don't want Vice Chairman Tarver to put me in a headlock later or shove me in my locker. But Mr. Chairman, I think what we've heard this morning, and I think it's pretty clear that this idea and this bill needs some work. And we're ready to do that with you, but I think it's going to take a little bit of time. I think it's pretty clear that step one is getting a better understanding in this committee, and not just this committee, but everyone in this room about what hydrogen is, what the landscape of projects are, what's possible in Wyoming, what's not. There are no projects in Wyoming right now, and I think I don't want to volunteer them for anything, but I think the right people to do it would be the School of Energy Resources to talk about these projects and what they do and how they work. And then as it relates to taxation, Mr. Chairman, I just want to read real quickly this implementation strategy regarding Wyoming's energy, that the approach will be to provide supportive government policy, favorable tax strategies, grants, and loan programs to encourage investment in energy projects. That's the implementation strategy written in Wyoming's Common Sense Energy Policy, written by the Freedom Caucus. And so a bill that the department doesn't think they can implement, that we're not sure we can meet, that certainly isn't favorable to an energy project that hasn't even begun in Wyoming, it's not the right approach. I would ask the committee to set this bill back and let's work on it. Let's work on it in the future. We're open to the conversation about it because there's a point to be made, as Representative Tarver has made. But this isn't, I don't think, the right bill for it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Obermuller. Any questions for Mr. Obermuller? Seeing none, Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Shane Schultz. I'm with law firm Brownstein, Hyde, Farber, Schreck in Cheyenne, and I have a couple clients that have been looking at hydrogen. Tallgrass Energy was part of the hydrogen hub for this region. Another client, Mitsubishi Power, has been looking at this as well. And also, in the interest of self-preservation, I don't want to upset Mr. Tarver, Representative Tarver, for putting me in a headlock either, but I will say he's rivaling being the best dressed in the house with that jacket. But I just, to Mr. Obermuller's points, I think it's premature. I'm sure both of my clients would be very interested in participating in a working group or talking about this in the interim to figure out the right structure to both for the state to capture what they feel like is the right revenue source, but also understand the need to make sure we're not penalizing the industry that really doesn't exist yet in Wyoming, but has potential to exist.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Mark, are there anyone online for 161? Well, with that, we'll close public testimony. Committee, what's your pleasure? Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I co-sponsored this bill. I think it's an important topic for us to discuss, and I think it's clear today that we have a lot more discussion to do. We want to get it right, so I make a motion, we table this bill and we push it into as a priority in the interim topics.
Okay.
Second.
Motion Made by Representative Lawley to table the bill, seconded by Representative Campbell. There's no discussion on that. All those in favor of tabling 161, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that bill has been tabled, and we'll bring it up as an interim topic. We don't decide the topics, we make recommendations, and the Management Council will ultimately decide, but it is a very good topic. We have some time. There's nobody actively pursuing hydrogen at this time, so I've been involved in a number of lawsuits over point of valuation. The state of Wyoming has been involved in a number of those issues. We want to get it right, so let's take some time and do this a little bit more, get more details. So moving along, we will now go to House Bill 208, Atmospheric Geoengineering Prohibition. Vice Chair Tarver, back to the hot seat for you. Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, Reuben Tarver, House District 52, and I'm bringing a bill that has been shoved down my throat in a pleasant way by my constituents. They are very passionate about this, and so I will briefly go over the bill. I have a feeling this bill might have the same fate as the previous bill, but let us find out. So it's basically, in my opinion, this is just bringing forth, are we doing geoengineering? And it sets in place testing standards so we can at least get a benchmark and start the measuring process. And of course, I'm sure you've all seen the estimate to what that's gonna cost. So if you guys don't kill it now, it'll certainly die on the floor, I'm sure. But anyway, it just puts in place testing requirements, and I don't know what else to say about it. Geoengineering, of course, is, spraying particles into the atmosphere to change the temperatures, and that does concern my constituents greatly. And if you want to go down that rabbit hole, there's hours and hours and hours and hours of reading and watching and learning, and of course, there's people on both sides of this argument, and I really don't know the 100% the answers, but that's what this bill is here for. And there will be some people testifying behind me that know a lot more than I do about this. I would stand for some questions, and I'll do my best.
Representative Tarver, thank you. Any questions for the representative? Representative, how will this affect our cloud seeding efforts that we do annually if this bill were enacted?
Mr. Chairman, it would stop our cloud seeding process. And to their concerns, they're just not interested. My constituents are not interested in meddling in weather, period.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tarver. Representative Tarver. Also, one other state has just recently passed legislation that's similar to this. Is this modeled after that state's legislation, or is this totally different?
Mr. Chairman, that's exactly what this is modeled after, because this is a starting point. I'm sure we're gonna get lots and lots of feedback on this, and I think this is a bill that probably gonna need a little bit of work, but this was a starting point to get the conversation going, and that's why I brought this forth.
Representative Lawley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Tarver, Vice Chairman Tarver. From the page 1 on the legislative findings, so is it correct then what we're dealing with is actions of the federal government in this area? Is that the kind of target based on, that's what I understand based on that finding, is that correct?
Representative.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, that is what I am being told, and that's about as far as I can go with that.
Okay, follow up.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Help me understand on what basis the state could dictate to the federal government to cease doing this.
Representative Tarver.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, that's a great question. And of course, it'll end up in litigation, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. And I think that's where we'll end up, is in litigation. And of course, it will depend a lot on who's at the federal level. And you know, we have an opportunity right now, it looks like to me, to move this forward. So that's another reason it's sitting here.
Follow-up. Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't notice in the bill anywhere where you give authority, like to sue the federal government or any actions against them. So I guess that's why I'm kind of wondering what exactly we're doing, other than putting a lot of regulations on our state to do monitoring, but no real actions towards the source of the problem or a way to, mechanism to try to, intervene either legally or otherwise. So can you help me with that?
Representative Tarver.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Baldi, I certainly can. It's probably not in the bill, that's why you didn't see it, and therefore, if we move forward with this, we'll have to be needing your help to put that in the bill, honestly.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Tarver, who owns the airspace over Wyoming? Is that Wyoming or the federal government? Do you know?
Representative Tarver. I saw the stink eye.
Chairman, Representative Campbell, that's a great question. You know what? I don't know the answer to that.
All right.
Hopefully someone in the room might. That's a good question.
I think Representative Knapp must know. He's raising his hand. Representative Knapp.
Mr. Chairman, actually, I just had a question.
Okay.
Representative Tarver, there are private companies actually that do this as well. I think some experimenting with sea salt and things like that privately. Would this bill cover those as well?
Representative Tarver.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Knapp, if I understand the question correctly, you're referring to what is being put into the atmosphere as being sea salt, and I believe it would cover that. I believe it would cover basically anything that you're putting into the atmosphere that would affect the atmosphere or change temperatures or rainfall, et cetera, et cetera.
Follow up? All right. One more question before you come back up. There are a number of large farms that use aerial airplanes for pesticide and doing things for their cropland. Would this prevent them from being able to put Roundup on their farms or doing some of that aerial spraying that they typically do, crop testing per se?
Mr. Chairman, my knowledge would say no. This is specific to changing weather patterns, atmospheric weather patterns is the way I understand the bill. Not controlling insects or anything else. That's the way I read it.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll now open it up to other elected officials. Representative Locke, thank you for being here to our little committee. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Tony Locke, House District 35 Representative, and thank you for this opportunity, committee, to just have a quick discussion on this. I too am here representing constituents that are very interested in that as well as myself. This geoengineering is a very fairly well known. It's come out. It's been done for a very long time. And there's lots of information out there, and I am far from the expert, but I know some experts will be talking. But I think it's important to note that the key here is that in many of these geoengineering projects, some of the stuff that they're spraying in there is a wide range of chemicals, often not healthy for humans, along with a wide range of metals and other particulates, again, that they're dropping, that they're using for this. And again, this is one of those programs that was very low key, but over the last several years has come out now. As a lot of information has come out, people have started testing the material that's being sprayed up for the geoengineering. So there's lots of data out there, and again, I am not the expert, but what I wanted to say is, you know, the question, I know there's a lot of great questions being asked by the committee. For example, you know, who owns the airspace and all that? Maybe the more important question is, do we want to allow those chemicals and those metals and some of those other particulates that are being dropped on our citizens, do we want to allow that? Maybe that's the better question, right? Maybe the better question is, do we have an obligation to make sure they're not dumping stuff in our atmosphere, trying to change to geoengineer that is unhealthy for our people, that is unhealthy for our crops and those kinds of things. So I would just propose to the committee to think of it from that perspective. You know, who owns the airspace? Oh, we don't own it, therefore we don't want to deal with it. But I would argue that maybe we have an obligation to protect ourselves, make sure that the department that measures these things is checking on that and making sure that they're not dropping things on in our skies and over our people that are not healthy for our people, for our crops, and those other kinds of things. The other thing I did want to mention is one state, I believe, has passed this. It is my understanding that at least somewhere between 18 and 20 additional states, I believe, are attempting to run these bills, similar bills as well, understanding, basically taking the same approach. Hey, is it right for whoever to be dropping these kinds of things on the people? And at least this bill would get us started with, hey, if you're going to drop, you know, first of all, I would like to think our state and the appropriate departments are at least aware of it, right? We'd like to make sure they are aware of it. And under the appropriate conditions, I'd like to make sure, hey, we should be testing. And if there's chemicals that we think, hey, that's not good for our folks, we should know that. So I'm in favor of this bill, and I just wanted to at least present, and I stand for questions.
Thank you, Representative Law. Questions, Representative Larson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Locke, thanks for being here. Down in my neck of the woods, we're a part of the Colorado River system, and we've been in a drought for quite a long time, decades. And I just wanted to, you know, ask how you reconcile that in your mind with the fact that our system needs a lot more water to make up for the losses or the drought that we've seen over the last few decades, and the fact that you know, we're trying to cloud seed so we can get more water down into our streams and put more snow in our snowpacks. So what are your thoughts, and how do you reconcile with that?
Representative Locke?
Well, as I read the bill, I know that there are some.
Representative Locke, through the chair, please.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, very sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Representative Larson. It is my understanding in the bill that there are current contracts, and I believe the bill says that those contracts will be left in place. And I don't think they're perturbed by this bill, certainly. There is probably a broader conversation. I do know that there are some better-known specific cloud seeding projects. There might be a broader conversation on that topic, and I won't tell you I'm the expert. But I do know that some of the existing contracts that are in place, it was my understanding by this bill, they were to be left in place, so.
Thank you. Follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And do you know if this bill addresses the fact that once the contracts are up, can they be renewed? Or is it once the contract has been completed, are we done? What's your understanding?
Representative Locke?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Larson. I don't believe this bill addressed that.
All right, thank you. Representative Lawley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Chairman Locke. You kind of referenced some maybe knowledge about what is happening in this area in Wyoming. What do you have personal knowledge of or know about what's happening currently in Wyoming? And who's doing it?
Chairman Locke?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Lawley, I cannot give you that specific. I know there are, I have a particular constituent who I know is currently doing a lot of testing and measuring of some of these chemicals and metal particulates and things. But I would be, I am not knowledgeable in depth of that specifically, nor I could make specific claims about what is actually being done.
Follow up,
Yes.
Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to turn to the fiscal note and talk about the numbers that are in there. I don't know if you have the bill in front of you, but because and that's a balance here of what do we know that's really happening versus what we're going to spend of state money just to see. I'm not saying maybe that shouldn't happen, but it is something as we're looking at cutting our budgets, cutting back, and just have any thoughts you have on that concerning the fiscal note.
Chairman Locke?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Lawley, I'm sorry I don't have a lot of thought on that. I do think it is valuable to consider looking into doing some testing, getting a feel for what is happening, or at least if there are things happening. But I understand you make a great point about the fiscal note. So, but again, I think it's an important topic based on the data that's out there, because if there is chemicals, unhealthy chemicals and/or metals that are being dropped that are affecting us, we would be remiss if we just ignored that. So I believe some testing would be valuable.
Thank you. We're going to go online to Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Locke, you may not have the answer to this question, but everything that we emit into the atmosphere, emissions, we have a pretty fairly precise analysis of the composition of those emissions. Now, this is a similar situation. I'm wondering if we have safety data sheets and chemical compositions of whatever these, for example, cloud seeding, are those DEQ regulated compositions? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you are now well above my pay grade. Thank you.
All right. Any follow-up, Representative Riggins?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Representative Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Locke. Real quick question on page 3, subsection B, where it says the department shall test the air quality at site subject to geoengineering. Would it not possibly behoove us to look at ground test, soil test, as well as air quality testing?
Chairman Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would say it probably would. And for example, I know one of my constituents is doing those kinds of tests. So it would make sense to me at least.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, thank you, Chairman. Oh, we have one over here, sorry. Representative Schmidt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Locke, do you have any idea how long these programs have been going on? 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, decades? Any idea?
I couldn't give you the exact numbers. I think some of the experts that know that far better than I do. I do know that it's pretty well documented that weather engineering was done in the Vietnam War. So how long has it been done over our country? It's my understanding probably 30, 40 years, and I may be well off on that, but it has been a while that it's been going on.
Follow up? All right. Thank you, Chairman, for being here. Not seeing any other elected officials in here, departments of the state that would like to testify. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for being here. Would you state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jason Mead, Director of the Water Development Office, and this morning today I have Barry Lawrence, who's our Deputy Director of Planning with me. As Representative Tarver pointed out, the reason I'm here testifying today is because the way the bill is currently written, it would discontinue the Water Development Commission's cloud seeding program that's been supported by the Select Water Committee and the legislative body for about the past 20 years. So this morning, I'd just like to have Barry, who's been really involved in this since the inception of the program within our department, explain our cloud seeding program, and then briefly present, when he's finished, a proposed amendment on behalf of the state engineer for your consideration. So with that, I would hand it over to Barry.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Barry Lawrence, Deputy Director for Planning, Water Development Office. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to explain our current cloud seeding program, what is going on. The program, and we've talked a lot already about how long has it been going on. And relative to Wyoming's program, it's been going on almost 20 years now. Cloud seeding in Wyoming goes way back, further than that. Some of the earliest programs, one of the earliest ones is the Eden Valley Irrigation District. They're in the Farson area. They've been seeding clouds since the 80s. They don't have a current, they're not doing it currently, but they have a long running track record, 40 to 50 years of doing that operation. So relative to our program, this program, just so you know, it's a winter snowpack augmentation program. We're not operating in the summer months, so forth. It's winter snowpack augmentation. We are seeding clouds over 3 mountain ranges. So the 3 mountain ranges are the Medicine Bows, the Sierra Madres, and Wind River Range. We run from the months of November to April, okay? So about November 1st to April 15th. And the idea here is to affect small increases in snowfall incrementally. These are not wholesale changes. We're just trying to affect a little bit of a change over each storm as it comes along, the ones that are seedable, and such that over the entire season, you're building up this, gradually, incrementally building up additional snowpack. And the idea here is that, and as we all know, Wyoming's largest reservoir is in that snowpack. So it's an effort to make the system whole. It is trying to increase water supplies in the affected basins, obviously for irrigators, municipalities, industry, and of course, there's always the issue of compact compliance and compact obligations because we are a headwater state, and that was already alluded to. The seeding itself is conducted either by ground-based generators or aircraft. Our primary seeding agent is silver iodide, which acts as an artificial ice nuclei. Basically, we're putting in tiny particles such that which water needs to freeze. These particles act on what they call supercooled liquid water. It's a raw material to promote freezing at warmer temperatures. So basically what we're doing is we're accelerating the precipitation process. We're acting as a catalyst to get that going and to make that cloud more efficient in what it does. And although the program is 24/7, as I mentioned, 5.5 months, approximately 24/7, we're not seeding every storm. You have to have the right ingredients, the right constituents, and so you have to have that supercooled liquid water, as I mentioned, but you also have to have the correct temperatures, you have to have the correct wind speed, direction. So we're not seeding every storm, but we are incrementally over the whole winter seeding a bunch of events. If briefly, I did want to mention, Mr. Chairman, a little bit about the program history, because I think it's important. Why did the state get involved in this technology? Why are we looking at it? Basically, it goes all the way back to 2003, when the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts approached the state and wanted the state and water development to look at this as a potential for cloud seeding in southwest Wyoming. It was actually Area 5 of the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts that asked us to do that. Also, at the same time, drought was raging, and governor had a drought task force. They held a workshop in Lander. They had experts come in on cloud seeding. So all this was gelling at about the same time, and there was certainly a recognition of other states' programs, and I can speak to that later if there are questions. There are large active programs in the surrounding states. All this led to, at that time, as I said, back in 2003, 2004, led to a 1-year feasibility study to lay out a blueprint for a much larger pilot program. It was about a $100,000 study at the time. And again, looking at those same 3 mountain ranges, and primarily those 3 mountain ranges because of basin issues and water supplies. Okay, so the Medbos, Sierra Madres, and the Wind River Range. So then the state entered into, and this was in the 2005 timeframe, a 9-year research program to determine efficacy of cloud seeding in those 3 mountain ranges. This include a randomized statistical design in Medbos and Sierra Madres, real-time modeling, independent evaluation, physical sampling, in addition to 24 ground-based generators. And also a part of this, we've been talking about silver and environmental impacts and so forth. There was a NEPA analysis done with the Forest Service's lead, and that came out with a CADX determination, and that was back in 2006. That was the record of decision in CADX. The results of the 9-year study showed that the accumulation of evidence from the statistical modeling, the physical analysis, and all the components, all parts of that. And I should tell you, we had separate contracts. We had a contract for the operators and a contract for the evaluators. So, that's one thing that I think was really unique about the Wyoming program, that you didn't have the folks that are doing the seeding to evaluate their own results. And so it was independent contracts. In the case of the evaluation contract, that was done by the National Center for Atmospheric Research, NCAR out of Boulder, that did the independent evaluation of the operators and how effective were we being. So as I mentioned, 9-year program. But bottom line, out of that, the analysis, all the analysis that NCAR did suggested a positive seeding effect in the order of 5 to 15% for precipitation on seedable storms, okay? One of the things that was also looked at, we also had a separate contract with the Desert Research Institute out of Reno, Nevada, who went out and did the silver sampling. We've been talking about the silver sampling. We looked at silver samples and we did baseline sampling before we began the seeding, and then as the seeding began during the studies. And we looked at the silver in the snowpack, the soil, the streams consisting of snowmelt, and it showed negligible environmental impacts from seeding. As a matter of fact, it was hard enough, besides looking at it from an environmental standpoint, you also want to look at it from a targeting standpoint. Are you actually hitting the target? And it was hard enough to find it when they did find it, and they did find it from time to time, it was 5 to 10 parts per trillion. And scientists told us that it would have to be orders of magnitude greater to have any human health concerns whatsoever. We also looked at extra area effects because we've certainly heard, I think, talked about this, the idea if you seed in one area, are you robbing moisture from somebody downwind? And that was looked at. Long-term studies have shown that that's not an issue. And in the case of the Wyoming program, the net effect of the simulated seeding outside the target areas was 0 or near 0. So that was not an issue. Also, we had strict suspension criteria such that we did shut off if we had any issues with snowpack getting to a point, and it happened over a few different years, seasons, where we had to pull the plug on the program because we don't want to be seen as making a bad situation worse for runoff and so forth, and so we would suspend operations, and that was based on snow water equivalent and the snow tell stations that were monitored regularly throughout the program. So operations, as mentioned, we have going on currently. Overarching, I just will say ground and airborne operations in the state. One of the things that you should know, and I know Representative Larson mentioned, how do the contracts and so forth work? We do seek funding annually from the legislature for the cloud seeding for operations, and we're always working a year in advance. So right now, for instance, the omnibus water bill construction, which is working its way in the legislature, has funding for next year's winter operations, okay? Has next year. So because it's annual appropriations, we have annual contracts with our firms. Also, in addition to seeking annual appropriations from the legislature, we do seek external funding contributions, cost share, and I'll talk about that here in a second. Relative to permits, I know that was, I think Representative Lawley asked the question about permits and so forth and who else is operating. Annually, we approach the state engineer's office and get permits for each of the 2 programs, the ground-based and the airborne. And there's also monthly reporting requirements of our vendor that does that seeding for us to the state engineer's office. The 2 other operating programs in the state currently, other than the state's programs, Idaho Power is operating in Star Valley area, okay? And then also North American Weather Consultants are operating in Southwest Wyoming, and they are targeting the high Uintas, okay? But as I mentioned, so those are annually renewable permits that folks have to come and get from the state engineer's office. So relative to our program, and I'll bring this all home, relative to the airborne program, as I mentioned, that started, we're targeting the Medbos Sierra Madres, and it's all about augmenting flows in the Platte and the Little Snake. We are in our 7th year of operations this year. It started in winter of 18-19, 5.5-month program, November to April 15th. The aircraft is based in Cheyenne. And should you be interested, this year we did start November 8th, and we've had 13 flights leading up to January 1st, about 56 hours of flight hours. The aircraft uses wing-based flares and ejectables. We also received funding on the program from the Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities, about $50,000 for that program, Because here again, we've talked about Wyoming's biggest reservoir is in that snowpack. And of course, the city of Cheyenne has an interest from a drinking water supply standpoint of having ample water supplies. So they participate in our program. We also talked about a little bit about, how much bang for the buck are you getting? We did do, because one of the things we've heard from legislators, and I should tell you that over the years, the earlier debate says, does it work? Does the technology work? Well, there have been such huge advances in the technology over the last 10 years, what not only Wyoming did, which we should be very proud of, but also the state of Idaho, Idaho Power, their research working with the University of Wyoming, they got the holy grail, the microphysical processes, everything that folks are looking for in the radar reflectivities. They saw that, they've got it in the peer-reviewed journal articles, and it's just exciting times in the cloud seeding world. And because of that, the debate has changed from does it work to, okay, well, we now know it works, but how much bang for the buck are we getting? Who should be paying for it? So to answer that question, last year, we did a one-year study funded by the legislature to look at, we did a hydrologic assessment, also done by the National Center for Atmospheric Research, taking our 4 years of flight data at the time, flying over the Midwest Sierra Madres, and they picked the year where we had the most data. We weren't cherry picking, they picked the year where they had the most intensive analysis. They looked at advanced modeling tools, flight level cloud measurements, ground-based weather data, and so forth, and they came up with a simulated seeding effect anywhere between, on the precip, between 6,000 to 14,000 acre feet additional because of the seeding of that winter, in the winter of 1920. But then that, obviously, it's about water, so then they routed it, and they had the folks, the hydrologists with NCAR, routing it using the WRF hydro model and so forth, routing it to what's additional in the stream. Obviously, you lose the soil moisture and ET and so forth, but coming out of that, we came up with the Upper North Platte receiving about 2,800 acre feet additional, Upper Laramie 2,300 additional, the Little Snake and the North Platte headwaters between 300 and 800 acre feet additional. So it all added up to about 7,000 acre feet additional water. So then you take it against how much did it cost to run the program that year, and we were coming in low end between $56 per acre foot to high end $124 with a medium of $81 per acre foot. So that was trying to get at the questions that we were getting relative to does it make sense to invest in this technology, okay? I should tell you, relative to the ground-based program, I'll switch and bring it home here. On the ground-based program, we are targeting the Wind River and the Sierra Madres. Here and one of the big things, we've already talked about this, we're augmenting Colorado flow, upper basin Colorado flows. We have 13 ground-based generators, 10 upwind to the Wind River range, 3 upwind to the Sierra Madres. It's a 5.5-month program. And one of the things I need to let you know is since 2018, we were signatory, state of Wyoming is signatory with the other basin states, the 7 basin states. We have an agreement. It's a programmatic funding agreement among 7 basin states such that lower basin entities are cost sharing with cloud seeding in the upper basin states. So you have this situation where you have the big, large water purveyors down south, Southern Nevada Water, Central Arizona, 6 Agency Committee, Central California, are helping fund cloud seeding in Wyoming, Utah, and Colorado to the tune of $500,000 a year. So that gets the fiscal note. Somebody mentioned the fiscal note. Obviously, that would be lost revenue that would not come in. But in this case of Wyoming, we're in a unique situation where the funding for the seeding that's going on in that program, the ground-based program, is being paid for 63% by other entities. The state of Wyoming only pays 37%, and that's actually in the legislation. You'll see it in the omnibus construction bill when it comes forward, because we have large folks down south that are interested in investing in the technology. And one of the reasons is that, as I mentioned, this large agreement, why did it come about? Because cloud seeding is a tool in the toolkit. It is part of the drought contingency plan for the Colorado River Basin, and it's seen as a very viable strategy for increasing flows and water supplies and helping meet our compact compliance. With that, I'll turn it back over to our director, Mr. Chairman.
So, Mr. Chair, just real quickly, you should have in front of you an amendment for consideration. Again, this was provided by the state engineer, Brandon Gebhardt. He couldn't be here today. He apologizes, but he had a family emergency to attend to. But we've spoken, and he just really wanted to point out the conflict between the bill and Title IX statutes that allow for permitting of weather modification through the state engineer, and specifically to qualified individuals to get permits to do that. And as Barry mentioned, we have 4 permits currently within the state, and just the ground-based generator program within the Colorado River Basin within Wyoming is an important tool for the flow augmentation and the drought contingency planning discussions in the Colorado River Basin. So with that, the bill or the amendment would simply add a paragraph at the end of section 2 on page 4, line 4, which would allow weather modification activities that were permitted under the state engineer list. So with that, we would stand for questions.
Thank you guys for your testimony on this. Committee, we have some questions? Representative,
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair or Chair?
whatever makes you feel good.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So yeah, it sounds like this has been going on a long time. Sounds like you guys believe this is successful. But how do you know it's successful if we don't know what the results of not doing anything? If you're following my question, what I'm trying to get to is if we hadn't have done any cloud seeding, how do you know it's successful when we don't know what would have happened if we didn't do it?
Mr. Chair, Representative Schmidt, an excellent question. And that's one of the reasons that 9-year pilot program that I mentioned to you was a randomized statistical crossover design, such that we had precip gauges in each of 2 mountains, the paired mountains, the Medbos and Sierra Madres, okay? And so what they did was they, when the conditions were right, and they had to be right in both mountain ranges, okay? It had to be similar conditions, seedable conditions above both mountain ranges, a case was called. And that case was called, and by the forecaster, the person that was running the generators, these are all remote, I should tell you, they're remote control generators, satellite modem and so forth, got a seeding decision. And this was done by the National Center for Atmospheric Research, a randomized seeding decision, which mountain range to seed. So you had paired statistical test here. So they got a seeding decision. Oh, I'm supposed to seed the Medbo. They turned on the Medismo generators, and they did not turn on the Sierra Madres. They never divulged back to the folks that are doing the forecasting which mountain range was seeded. That went on for over 100 cases over 9 years, so that it was a randomized seeding experiment to get at exactly the question, Representative Smith, that you're asking, because they didn't want to bias them, and they wanted to look at, well, what difference is it making? So over all those years and building up all those cases, that randomized statistical design came up with the result 5 to 15% difference versus seed versus no seed. So sometimes one of the mountain ranges was seeded, the other one wasn't, and vice versa. The other thing I would mention, Mr. Chairman, Representative Schmidt, one of the things on the SNOWY program, and we have folks here that can testify better to this better than I can. They're involved in the program. The SNOWY program was in Idaho. And there was also radar reflectivity where they actually saw when they had aircraft, they could see through the dropping ejectables into the clouds and so forth with the right conditions. You could actually see that in the radar reflectivities. And you could see the zigzag pattern, which is certainly not natural for precipitation. But here again, we have folks here in the audience that can speak better to that than I.
Follow up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are these chemicals, are they inert when they hit the ground?
Mr. Lawrence?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Schmidt, my understanding is they are not. But I have folks here that can speak better to that, the DEQ.
More questions?
That's it for now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Campbell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you guys for being here. My question is, if the amendment that was handed out here, that would take care of the cloud seeding program. With the cloud seeding program aside, you guys have said that you guys have got baseline samples for 9 years. Do you guys test for any not related to cloud seeding at all? Do you guys test for any heavy metals or any other specific toxins?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, yes, part of the 9-year, we did the baseline at the beginning of the study, and it looked at all crustal elements, the whole bit, the whole suite, standard suite, and that's in our final report.
Follow up?
Was there any anomalies in any of that?
Mr. Chairman, no, there was not.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions, committee? Representative Larson?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Thanks for being here and testifying and giving the background on our program. So let's say we did pass this bill and it cut our program, cut our contracts after a year. What impact would that have on our standing in discussions with the Colorado River committees that deal with the compact? I know that that's a state engineer question, and maybe Mr. Brown could help us with that, but I think that this does help with our standing, saying that we are trying to increase our yield.
Who would like to take on that question? Mr. Brown?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, happy to be here. My name is Chris Brown. I supervise the water section of the Attorney General's office. And again, the state engineer hoped to be here, but he's got a family emergency, so I'll do my best. And Representative Larson, I don't know that I can answer that exactly, except to say, as part of the process, and you mentioned the Colorado River Basin has been in drought since 2000, a millennial drought. The states are struggling with how to deal with that reduced water supply. And as we come up with tools on how to deal with that reduced water supply, everything's on the table. And this is part of those tools. It's in that suite of tools that we have available to address the problem, which is a massive, massive problem that we're trying to address. With regard to cloud seeding specifically, it's been part of the upper basins approach, our drought contingency plan since 2014. And the lower basin states have participated in paying for that because a rising tide floats all boats to help the basin since 2014. And certainly the folks downstream, the folks in the upper basin see extreme value in employing every tool we can to try to address the deficits that we're seeing in the basin.
Committee, any? Representative Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of this. This sounds a lot like climate change to me. We all know what that is. And we all know that for every action, there's an equal or opposite reaction. What is it?
Who would like to take that question?
Do we know? Do we know what the effects of this is long-term?
Mr. Lawrence?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Schmidt, there's certainly folks here in the room that could answer that better than I, but I will tell you that the surrounding states, Colorado, Utah, Idaho, have been doing this for a lot of years. A matter of fact, that's one of the reasons that Wyoming got into this, was because of the activity in the surrounding states. And there are long-term baseline assessments that have been done, because the issue that you asked about bioaccumulation and so forth has been looked at, and it just hasn't been an issue.
Mr. Brown?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Schmidt, and maybe I can help put a little bit more detail on an earlier question. How long have you been doing this? And Mr. Lawrence testified, of course, with regard to the Wyoming program and the incredibly in-depth study that was done as part of that testing that was done in the early 2000s. The first statutory authorization with regard to the permitting for weather modification was enacted in 1951. The first permits for weather modification were enacted in 1951. As part of that original authorization, the state of Wyoming legislature created a weather modification board to do and engage in some of those studies to explore the new technology that was coming out then. That board existed until about 1981, when it was just, that board was done away with, and then it was put into the state engineer's office. And I think Mr. Lawrence also alluded to not only the process in Wyoming, but the other states, and I think some recently, many studies that have done to answer some of the questions that you all asked today that pop up that make a whole lot of sense. Another thing I'll mention is that when we were going through our drought contingency planning in the Colorado River Basin, of course, we try to leverage all the resources we can to try to pay for some of these incredibly expensive activities that we're engaged in, and the federal government wouldn't participate. They didn't believe, at least at the time when we enacted our drought contingency plan in 2014, that the science was sufficient for them to put the federal money behind it. There was some evidence, but it just wasn't sufficient. They've changed their minds since then. The incredible amount of additional research that has gone on. The federal government will now also participate in funding some of these research or experiment or seeding activities. And so a lot has happened. It's been around for a very long time, and I think a lot of that analysis, I'm not an expert in that, but I'm aware that a lot of that analysis has been done.
Follow up? Representative Knapp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've mentioned it a couple times, but I just had a question, Mr. Lawrence. So for the contributors that are contributing financially, is that all public or is it public-private? Could you give me some idea of who's contributing?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, Representative Knapp, for the program in the Medbo Sierra Madre, the airborne program, the only contributor we have is the City of Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities, okay, $50,000. In the case of the ground-based program, and we were targeting the winds in the Sierra Madres for flows in the Colorado River Basin, we have, as I mentioned, the big three purveyors in the lower basin, which is Southern Nevada Water Authority, Central Arizona project, and then the six agency committee, Colorado River Board of California six agency committee. So the big three are paying the $500,000 a year. In addition to that, we have Rocky Mountain Power kicking in a little bit of money. We also have Green River, Rock Springs, Sweetwater County Joint Powers Board kicking in a little bit of money. And then we have the Wyoming Mining Association. Obviously, water is very critical to them, and they are contributing a little bit of money as well.
Follow up? Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you guys for being here. My question is, in regard to my constituents, people do contrast and comparison. They watch a jet fly at approximately the same altitude, and they can see a contrail of ice crystals that quickly forms and then dissipates quickly. They also see that same plane flying at the same elevation that leaves a contrail that does not dissipate and go away, but instead fans out and turns into a large cloud-like formation. You can see them when they tic-tac-toe across our Wyoming skies. Is that our cloud seeding program?
Mr.
Mr. Lawrence.
Chairman, Representative Campbell, absolutely not. Ours is very localized. We are just a little bit upwind of each of the three mountain ranges. We are targeting just that localized area, those three mountain ranges.
I feel like there's two different topics here, and I think we'll drill down on that a little bit later. Follow up?
Yeah, I just wanted to know who owns the airspace over Wyoming? Is that Wyoming's or is that the government's, federal government's? Thank you.
Who would like to take that one? Okay, thank you. We don't have the answer to that, Mr. Campbell, but is there someone in the room that would have the answer to that question? Thank you. Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. And before I go into my question, I'll try to address that question a little bit. I did a little bit of Googling while I've been sitting here, and it's a kind of a complicated answer because the landowner has the right to build up as high as he'd like, as long as it's not impacting certain aspects of the airspace. But they're saying that when a plane flies over a property, as long as it's not too close and is regulated by FAA, it's not a taking of the land, basically. So it's a complicated conversation, but yeah, we don't want to go down that hole. It's kind of challenging. But as far as my question goes, you know, and this may be a wouldn't you agree at the end, but on one hand, we are saying that this cloud seeding program is potentially dangerous for water users, or the consumers of water downstream. But on the other hand, we're saying emissions from coal-fired plants have no impact on the climate. So what is it? Are emissions causing an impact on our climate, or are we, or I'm just trying to figure that out. I'm trying to reconcile that because I believe this is the climate hoax is a problem with our coal emissions. I mean, it's just a hoax in my opinion. But, you know, I think this has been an effective program. So I don't know. I'm just trying to drill down on that because I feel like we're conflicting on two things. I mean, the same people who think it's a hoax are also saying that climate change is being impacted with this program.
Was there a question there, Representative?
I think I'm just asking someone to organize my thoughts into some silos.
Representative Knapp.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So in some of the comments and looking at the bill, there is a program out there, and I just wondered if you could comment on it, the Solar Radiation Management Governance Initiative. I understand this is a localized effort for moisture. Are you aware of that program, and do you have any comment on it?
Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Knapp, I think I've heard of that program, but I certainly don't have enough information to comment on it.
Follow up? Any more
Vice Chair.
questions?
Mr. Riggins would like to.
Mr. Riggins, please.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. My question is for the program managers. When snowpacks hit 100%, do you continue with the program or do you move on?
Mr. Lawrence.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, Representative Riggins, is it?
Riggins.
Riggins, okay. Thank you for the question. One of the things that we do, we have strict snowpack suspension criteria. As I mentioned, it starts early in the season. You're looking at November 1, you're looking at the April 1st snowpack, what is 85% what is 85% of the snowpack, April 1 snowpack at November 1? So you have a line basically and then you're building up, you want to get to, at April 1, 140% of snowpack. So if at any time you gradual building of the snowpack from 85% up to 140%, but you're always looking at that April 1 number to determine that line. And so at any point when you cross that line, you suspend operations, okay? We're done. If snowpack recedes, goes back, and goes under the line, then we can start back up, okay? I will tell you, one of the years, as I mentioned earlier in our earlier testimony, that I believe it was 2010 or 2011, where we got to a point, we were at 200-some% in the Medbo Sierra Madres, and that was a record year, as you know, and we suspended 6 weeks early, excuse me.
Follow up, Mr. Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So sometimes do those other, our partners in this program, when we get these high snowpacks, and if we're adding to that from artificial moisture development, do their expectations start to get higher and higher from what we can provide them as time goes on?
Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Riggins, obviously, relative to our contributing partners, I think it's interesting, I should note that they receive daily forecasts, so they know of our seeding activities, what's going on with the program. We're regularly in contact with those folks. Obviously, they're interested, but to have us get to 140% of April 1, but there's no expectation beyond that.
Follow up?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any more questions from the committee? I have a question, and I believe, well, I'm confused about it, so perhaps you can help me with it. It appears that the geoengineering that this bill directs is perhaps not the same as the cloud seeding that we are participating in. Would that be accurate, and can you explain that perhaps a little further?
Mr. Chairman, I will tell you that obviously, as someone has already alluded to, there's numerous bills going forth and being pushed in various state legislatures currently. There is the issue of geoengineering, but oftentimes there is a lot of confusion also out there about cloud seeding and what we're doing versus contrails or chemtrails, as you've already talked about. There's other programs out there that alluded to, solar radiation type programs and that type of thing, which there's a lot of confusion. I mean, the winter snowpack augmentation, very targeted, what we're doing for a very specific purpose, It's a tried and true, and especially now with the advances, we've talked about the advances in the science and so forth. And so I do think there's a lot of confusion out there.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Oh, excuse me. Representative Knapp.
We mentioned that you use the silver iodide
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
follow-up. With that, has there been any studies related to health or related to environment? I know it's pretty negligible, but over a prolonged period of time, has there been any studies on wildlife or health impacts of any kind?
Mr. Chairman, I will, and Representative Knapp, I will tell you that that's obviously looked at. I know in the case of the Idaho program, they've looked at fish tissue samples and so forth. They've been doing this a lot of years. They also did a study where they looked at, they did an extensive literature review and so forth, looking at what has been done on other programs and so forth across the West and other places, looking at the very issue that you've asked for.
Any more questions? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else that would like to testify? I think you've done this before. You probably know how to do it better than I.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Todd Parfit, Director of the Department of Environmental Quality, and with me is Nancy Veer, the Administrator for the Air Quality Division. What this bill does is in the first section, it basically creates the prohibition for the geoengineering. And the next paragraph B, which is the one that's really impacting our fiscal impacts statement that we put together for the committee. And that requires testing for air quality and sampling of the precipitation, which brings in the water quality division. But it also requires the use of specific instrumentation, and I think that may be where some of the confusion may be in terms of, you know, what's the objective of the bill, and if it's to identify the speciation of what chemicals are there, then what's in the bill is appropriate. But if it's to look at what are the health impacts or potential health impacts, then maybe a different methodology would be more appropriate. And so we'll talk about that a bit. And then, as has been mentioned, we've worked with the Water Development Commission, the State Engineer's Office, in their efforts with the cloud seeding. There have been various environmental studies that have been done which have not shown any adverse impacts that we're aware of. So what I thought we would do is just break it up into air quality and water quality and talk about what some of the challenges might be the way this is currently drafted. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Veer, and she'll walk through some of the air quality challenges and questions that we might have.
Thank you, Ms. Veer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nancy Veer with the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality, Air Quality Division. I'm the administrator of that division. And just to give you a bit of background on the Air Quality Division, and there was some discussion earlier about who regulates what. For air quality, that's under federal law, the EPA regulates and sets standards, and then states have what's called primacy, where we are co-regulators and are with EPA to their standards. And so when we, in the state of Wyoming, we have authority over what are called stationary sources. So think of a piece of ground, a place where a plant is located, and then you might have a stack going up into the air where emissions come from. So we look to the ground to see where stationary sources are located, and then you go up into the air where that emissions come from. That's what we in the state of Wyoming, under state authority, can regulate. EPA sets some standards. EPA regulates other types of sources, and they don't allow states to regulate. One is on motor vehicles. That's an EPA, there's some stuff with California, but it's an EPA motor vehicle authority. Airplanes is another one. Someone had mentioned about contrails. And under the act, Wyoming has no or any other state has no authority over airplane emissions. That's EPA. When you talk about the airspace, that's not in how we look at it from an air quality when you're talking up into the atmosphere. But we do have monitors in place in Wyoming that monitor the pollutants that we regulate, and they're the health-based standards that EPA has set for things like particulate matter, carbon monoxide, lead, those type of pollutants like that. And there's about 6 of those that we monitor. We have a monitoring network in our state, and we're really proud of it. It's up on our website called YVisNet. It works kind of like YDOT's cameras. You can see a picture of what is going on, and then you can actually see real-time monitoring at many of our sites for these pollutants. And that particular program, we also have a monitor here in Cheyenne, and we call it our NCORE, and I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but it's our most comprehensive monitoring location in Wyoming. And we have what's called a PM 2.5 sampler there that actually can speciate what is in particulate matter. I'm going to stop for a second and kind of give you a little bit of a primer on what particulate matter looks like. And I'll do it verbally, but there is a really good picture. Think of a human hair, and that's a particulate matter of about 50 to 70 microns. And then there's a particulate matter size 10. And you think of that 50 to 70, and you can lay about 5 of those 10 on there. And then go smaller to 2.5 microns. And now you're at something that is inhalable going down into our lungs. And that's where the health-based standards that EPA set, they're concerned about. And in that PM 2.5, when you speciate it, then you can start identifying the different constituents. And so here in Cheyenne, we have a PM 2.5 monitor that does speciation. And it's part of what EPA calls their chemical speciation network. And they have these located throughout the United States at different locations. Wyoming collects these samples, but EPA takes care of all of the rest of the cost. So I don't have cost numbers I can give you on that chemical speciation. They collect those, they go to University of California, Davis to test. They do test for metals. I was talking to the head of our air quality monitoring program, and he mentions on the samples taken here in Cheyenne, about 90% of those samples are at such low levels for these metals that they're non-detect. And so only about 10% of those samples are at detection. And I don't have what those numbers are for the threshold. But EPA has not yet, to my knowledge, established any health-based standard for specific metals. They're just studying what metals are collected and have not, to our knowledge, notified us of anything of concern or seen anything of concern. Particulate matter, PM 2.5 that goes into our lungs, EPA has, and the levels have dropped. And Wyoming has great air quality. We've been meeting the health-based standards. We're getting ready. February 7th, we have to ask EPA to, or our governor has to submit a recommendation, to EPA to say what the level, if we're meeting that standard in Wyoming. And the information that we have to date is that every place we monitor is meeting that standard in Wyoming. And that is wonderful news. And so when we look at our monitors, those monitors that I mentioned that collect this stuff are basically at about 5 to 10 meters. Some are on the ground, on a stand, and then some we have up a little bit higher. So they're ground-based monitor. We do not have any monitors that go up higher than that. So when you're talking about something that I think someone had mentioned, airplanes and at above a certain height, FAA regulates those. We don't have any monitors that are sitting any higher than these kind of 5 to 10 meters above the ground. So we're not familiar with how you would sample in locations where there might be a moving source, and then how to figure out how to get to that location, how to understand where we can physically be because of private property and trespass laws, or how to deploy something. We don't have that mechanism currently. When Director Parfit mentioned about the testing of these, we don't have that piece of equipment. We don't have people to do that, and that goes into what our fiscal note is. We do receive calls from people concerned about when planes fly over and what that means. And I know it's not very satisfactory to them when we tell them, hey, we don't have jurisdiction over that. We have to go to EPA. I do have to say that we are hopeful that when we see a change in administration and we have bring things to EPA's attention, that they will start to listen and address them. And that's on all aspects of air quality. And so that's the best we can do right now with how the laws are currently set up on the federal level. But we are happy to go with, there's a lot of information on these monitors that we collect in Wyoming, and all of the information that we have so far is that we've got good air. So that kind of goes, I think, a little bit of a primer on air quality, but there are concerns that we have from the air quality standpoint with how the bill is written and how we would be able to do our work given the resources that we currently have in place, and we don't have that expertise, and we don't have that testing equipment, and we would have to develop a methodology and figure that out. We're happy to learn about it, but we just don't have that right now to put something in place. And then I think there was a question earlier when the co-chair had mentioned about the kind of the penalty provision. Under the Environmental Quality Act, we do have an ability when there's a violation on air quality or anything else under the Environmental Quality Act. There is several statutory provisions about what we do. Under 3511-701, the first thing we do, the legislature has directed us through conference and conciliation to get folks back into compliance. So that's the first thing we do. We try to talk to people, get them back into compliance. If it's a significant enough issue, we generally go then to what's called more formal enforcement action, and that's defined in the Act under 3511-901 in those series of statutes. And we can do things like issue a series, we call them notices of violation, where we allege a violation, and we work then with whoever we've made that allegation against to get into either a settlement agreement or through an order to get them back into compliance. There are penalties that can be assessed, but you have to go to court to get those. We can ask in a settlement for dollars. And so when we think about this particular bill and doing the air sampling, and again, understanding that at least at the one ground-based monitor that we have in Cheyenne, 90% of those are non-detects, and then only 10% would have levels. We would then have to, once we sample, figure out where that came from, because air moves and comes from lots of places. And there is, Wyoming was involved in a lawsuit not too long ago about ozone transport. And that was pollutants that we regulate. Ozone is formed by NOx and VOCs. And we have to demonstrate that we're not causing pollution to occur in another state that prevents them from meeting the health-based standards. EPA had done modeling and other studies and said state of Wyoming was causing non-attainment south of Denver at Chatfield Reservoir. And we said, no, we weren't. And we fought that. It took a lot of time, it took a lot of money, it takes complex modeling. And we were successful in that setting, but when you go to bring an enforcement case against an entity, you have to go to court if they don't agree to settle. So you have to have a certain level of information. And so if we sample an air sample and it shows a metal, we then have to figure out where did that come from? Because we'd be following the report of somebody that has a concern. If it's a plane flying over, then we're going to have to figure out where along, number one, who's the plane, what's in there, how do we get that information? And that's where I'm saying we currently don't have to do that because we're ground-based. And so we'd have to look for all of that information. And then once we find a constituent material, then we'd have to show that it came from that and not some other place. And so we are concerned about pollutants coming in from other states and international, but that's a lot of area of research going on right now on traditional pollutants. So I hope that helps the committee on understanding, at least from the air quality. We serve the public and we want to respond to concerns that the public have. There are some that are very challenging, and this is one from a perspective where we don't have that expertise in-house because it's been given to EPA federal. That would be challenging, so.
Ms. Veer, thank you. That was very eye-opening for me. Committee, do we have questions? Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple of questions. You mentioned monitors. You have monitors around the state? And how many were there?
So we have 20, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. The Air Quality Division itself has about 27 different monitoring locations. We have 3 what are called mobile stations that can be located. Usually they're deployed for about a year and at a specific location. We currently have one in Rock Springs near Western Wyoming Community College. We've had them in Riverton. We've had them in Laramie County. And those, each site doesn't all monitor the same pollution because it's very costly to do monitoring. These mobile trailers, I think combined cost about $350,000. Every time we deploy it, it's about $16,000. And then there's operations and maintenance costs of several. It can range from about $2,000 to $10,000 per month at each site. There's a lot of requirements and testing is expensive. And so we have, I think about 120 of those 27 monitors. There's about 120 different pollution monitors at those sites. Some only monitor particulate matter at 2.5, particulate matter at 10, ozone, and the like. And that's all up on our website. It's a great website.
Follow-up?
Yes. Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do. Are any of these monitoring sites in or downwind of any of these mountain ranges where cloud seeding?
Ms. Veer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have monitors located in the Upper Green River Basin. We have monitors at South Pass. We have, so I would say yes. Some might be a little bit of a distance from some of those. They're not maybe, we have monitors throughout the state, and so they would be downwind. It's just how far downwind.
Thank you.
Committee? Representative Smith.
One last question, Mr. Chairman, and this would be for the gentleman on the end. I apologize, I forgot your name. But again, what is the chemical we're using in the cloud seeding operation?
Mr. Lawrence.
Representative Schmidt, it's silver iodide.
Silver iodide?
Iodide.
Thank you. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
What was first? Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, guys. I have 2 quick questions that feed into each other. The first thing is, you say on these testing stations, they test for 127 different chemicals. There's way more than 127 different heavy metals and chemicals out there. So it's very broad, but it's not all inclusive, correct?
Mrs. Veer.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not aware of the name of all of the chemicals tested on that chemical speciation network, but I can certainly get those listed for you.
Follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And follow-up, what chemicals, is there something that you could think of that comes to mind? What would cause these contrails to expand out into the large clouds? Is there any known chemical that you're aware of? What would cause these contrails to grow out into these big, long clouds that go both directions in the sky and stuff? What what could possibly account for that? Do you know? Thank you.
Ms. Severe.
Mr. Chairman, I do not know.
More questions? Representative Knapp.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So with these monitors, because I'm just thinking of the Powder River Basin, when we have a non-attainment issue or anything like that, and you've got monitors out, are they geared for specific things that they look for? Or when you have monitors out, do you notice, or could you notice an anomaly of chemicals or metals if there were unauthorized spraying going on?
Ms. Fair.
Mr. Chairman, these chemicals let's say we only have this PM 2.5 speciation monitor here in Cheyenne that EPA is doing that chemical speciation. That's the only one I'm aware of that has the metals testing in it. However, the metals or anything else that's this PM 2.5 size gets captured in our continuous monitors as we monitor the pollutant called PM 2.5. And so we have those on a continuous basis. And when our monitoring group sees what's called an exceedance, there's a health-based threshold. And when they see the value go above that, we look at why. And typically we see those values go high when there's been wildfire smoke, either locally or transported into the state.
Committee, any more questions? Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Parfit?
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, I'd like to touch on just a few points related to water quality and the sampling of the precipitation.
Please.
So looking at it in the context of what the Water Development Commission does and their cloud seeding program, we know where that's occurring, and so we can plan to do sampling and look for any constituents that might be resulting from that activity. In the bill, it's what it becomes troubling is, or difficult, is upon receiving a report of a potential violation. So somebody sees something, they report it to us. We don't have that luxury of knowing exactly where and when that activity was taking place. And as Ms. Veer pointed out, and then we're in the position of having to identify which plane, where did it come from, where did they land, who, and what were they doing. And then if we can find that out, then we would have to be at the right place when the precipitation is occurring to be able to collect that sample. What we traditionally would do on a complaint, well, let me back up. What we traditionally do is we have an ambient water quality program. We go around the state and we assess the health of streams and lakes throughout the state. And we'll compare the analytical results that we get from the studies there with our surface water quality standards. And surface water quality standards have designated uses: protection of drinking water, protection of aquatic life, protection of wildlife, et cetera. So there are different criteria for different uses. But we'll compare that to see whether or not they're achieving those standards. And then if they're not, then it goes on what's called an impaired water body list, and then we go through the process of working with the local community to get those water bodies back into compliance. I bring that up because one of the things that we could look at doing is including these metals into the ambient studies if we have knowledge that there has been some geoengineering that may have occurred. So anyway, I bring that up. And then the second thing I wanted to bring up was that the bill suggests that to the extent possible, using this transmission electronic microscope, or TEM, the difficulty there is that that piece of instrumentation, as we understand it, is for looking at nanoparticles or speciation. Is silver there, yes or no? It's not a quantification, so you can't then compare that to a water quality standard to see if there's a violation. what would be better would be looking at the metals and analyzing them, the total metals, with the standard methodologies that we use when we collect our samples, and then comparing to see whether or not that is in conflict with the water quality standards. And then that gets back to the fiscal note. About $1.5 million of the cost is associated with that particular methodology. And each sample, as best as we can tell, we tried to research this, but for each sample, the cost to run it through the TEM is $5,000 per sample. If we do the traditional analysis for 23 metals, the cost is between $300 and $400. So it's a significant difference in cost. And so the fiscal note could be adjusted if we change the methodology that we used to analyze the samples. So, and I'll just wrap up by saying, you know, I agree with at the beginning in the early comments, this might be one that may need a little bit more discussion to get to some of these issues and how we might best move forward. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, committee. Thanks for your testimony. Is there anyone else that would like to come up and enlighten us? Please state your name, sir, and give us your testimony.
Yes, Jeff French. I'm a professor at the University of Wyoming in atmospheric science. And I want to state up front that I'm giving testimony based on my professional expertise, and nothing that I say in terms of my testimony is representing the University of Wyoming in any fashion. So, first off, I'd like to just note that there's been a lot of great discussion and really good questions that have come from this committee, and it's been very enlightening to listen to the conversation that's been going on today. My expertise is in cloud seeding, cloud evolution, and precipitation evolution. Geoengineering is a very broad topic, of which cloud seeding and modification of clouds is only a really small portion of geoengineering. I can talk specifics in regards to clouds and precipitation formation, other aspects of geoengineering, some aspects of solar radiation management, which was brought up earlier, SRM, does contain modification of clouds. There's other aspects of SRM that are completely unrelated to cloud and precipitation formation. My expertise, particularly in cloud seeding, dates back for about the last 20 years. I've been involved a little bit in providing technical expertise to the state of Wyoming and to the Water Development Office in their cloud seeding program as an independent evaluator, lending expertise to what was the evaluations conducted by National Center for Atmospheric Research. I've also was the lead investigator for the Snowy project. We heard Barry talk about that here a few minutes ago, which is a project based in Idaho that was a private-public partnership between Idaho Power Company and the National Science Foundation to look at the efficacy of cloud seeding in the mountains of southwest Idaho. We've heard the cloud seeding has been going on for 70 years plus in the U.S., throughout the western U.S. It's really only been in the last 20 years that we've been able to demonstrate that cloud seeding can be effective in certain circumstances. And we made major breakthroughs both with the Wyoming program in the early mid-2000s, and most recently, about 5 or 6 years ago, with the Idaho program, where we were actually able to demonstrate that we could release silver iodide into the atmosphere And we could track the parcels of silver iodide. We could make measurements directly within those parcels of air, or within those regions of air that contain silver iodide, to be able to track and measure the production of ice crystals and follow those ice crystals to the ground as precipitation that would not have otherwise fallen. So to reiterate a couple of things that Barry has said, cloud seeding has shown to be effective in at least very limited circumstances for targeting. It is used widely throughout the Intermountain Western US as a tool in the toolbox for water managers to augment water supplies, principally through snowfall in the Intermountain West. It is not meant to be a panacea, if you will, for low water supplies, extreme drought. It can incrementally increase the amount of water available through precipitation and snowfall in the Intermountain West. And it's an important tool from my standpoint. The other aspect of it is the utilization of cloud seeding has also given us the ability to make tremendous strides in our understanding of the natural evolution of clouds. So by cloud seeding, we're not creating another process that doesn't occur naturally. We're simply allowing that process to occur at a slightly different temperature and controlling that process to some degree, to a very minor degree. But it allows us to track how that process proceeds, which gives us additional information in terms of our understanding of natural cloud formation, which in turn we can utilize to improve our ability to represent these natural processes in clouds in models for forecasting, et cetera.
Thank you, Mr. French. Do we have any questions? Representative Knapp?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I know we've dialed down into cloud seeding. With the bill having dealt with geoengineering, I do have some questions on the SRM piece. To your knowledge, Mr. French, do you know if it requires pre-authorization for any SRM experimentation?
Mr. French.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Knapp, to my knowledge, no, it doesn't. Let me reiterate the point that SRM can be very broad. Cloud seeding over long time periods in where you're actually trying to modify the reflectiveness of a cloud is one form of SRM, as well as injection of aerosol particles into the atmosphere without any cloud formation at all is another form of SRM. To my knowledge, those considering solar radiation management through the augmentation of clouds are looking mostly at marine clouds. It was brought up earlier, and it was a great point. There are studies going on right now of injecting sea salt into the very lowest part of the atmosphere in ocean regions to modify the characteristics of the clouds to cause higher reflectivity of those clouds and reflect more solar radiation back to space. This is a natural process. Those clouds form with sea salt, but by injecting more sea salt into the atmosphere, into the lower atmosphere, you would produce a cloud that has more numerous but smaller drops and are more reflective than clouds with less sea salt. These are conditions that we would see naturally in, let's say, very windy conditions that where you would be generating more sea salt off the ocean surface.
Thank you. Committee?
Follow-up.
Follow-up.
And so, and I'm trying to get down to the intent of the bill, and maybe I shouldn't be, but how would we, in your opinion, best identify through monitoring if that were occurring in Wyoming, whether it was the sea salt application or whether it was some other cooling modification in MSR or SMR?
Mr. French?
Mr. Chairman, that, good question. I don't think I have a great answer for that. There are a wide variety that one can imagine when it comes to I wouldn't say proposed, because that I think gives too much credence to the idea. Imaginative ways, if you will, for solar radiation management. And coming up with a single strategy to try to identify that, I think, from my opinion, would be nearly impossible.
Thank you. Representative Campbell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Professor, for being here. My question is, going back to a constituent concern. Specifically, he stated that contrails could be going both north-south and east-west to form these large cloud formations. Is that a natural occurrence, sir, in
Mr.
your
French?
opinion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell. This is a great question, and it actually, I don't want to diverge too much off the subject, but this is a question that I asked my students, my graduate students, to be able to explain in our atmospheric thermodynamics class. So in short, it is a natural process. And the idea that contrails form, what's happening when a contrail forms is especially in the upper layers of the lower atmosphere where these jets fly 35,000, 40,000 feet. Oftentimes the atmosphere is in a state where it's what we call supersaturated with respect to ice, which means if ice crystals are in the atmosphere, they will grow naturally. But ice crystals, believe it or not, are relatively rare in the atmosphere. They need to form on particles. Liquid water drops are I would classify as sort of much more common and easy to form. As aircraft fly through the atmosphere, they release both water vapor and they release particulate matter, okay? Natural particulate matter through combustion. And ice can form on this particulate matter. Now, if the atmosphere is in a state such that it is already supersaturated with respect to ice, those ice crystals will continue to grow. And they won't evaporate. They'll grow until they get large enough to actually fall out and they can spread. If the atmosphere is in a state where there's less moisture in that layer, you may get a contrail to form for a short period of time. And as it mixes through the rest of the atmosphere, those ice crystals find themselves in a region where they're no longer supersaturated, but they're subsaturated with respect to ice, and then they will evaporate. So yes.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Professor. What has occurred in the atmosphere to where this phenomenon has become more pronounced in the last decade and a half?
Mr. French?
My guess would be more aircraft activity, but I don't know that for a fact.
Committee, any further questions? Representative Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Professor, I'm trying to understand how this works. You say the clouds are full of these ice crystals, or the ice crystals are in the atmosphere?
Mr. French?
Mr. Chairman, In regards to cloud seeding in general, or in regards to the Representative Campbell's question about
Well, you were just
contrails?
talking about ice
Representative
crystals growing and then they get heavy enough they'll eventually fall. By injecting the silver iodine into the clouds, does that then make the ice crystals melt and rain come down or snow come down, or how does that work exactly?
Mr. French.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Schmidt. So in regards to cloud seeding, okay, the clouds that are targeted in cloud seeding tend to occur in a very limited temperature range. Let's say between about -8 degrees Celsius and -15 degrees Celsius. So that's roughly, let's say, 22 degrees Fahrenheit to about 0 degrees Fahrenheit. These clouds in the atmosphere tend to be relatively devoid of natural ice crystals. They tend to be made up principally of liquid water, super cold liquid water. So they exist in a sort of metastable equilibrium, okay? So if they get pushed in one direction by, let's say, ice being present in those clouds, then what happens is that the ice crystals will begin to grow. And the liquid water in those clouds will begin to evaporate. So the ice crystals grow, the liquid water evaporates, and then when the ice crystals get large enough, they fall to the surface. So that's the basic physical description, understanding of how cloud seeding works. And it works then in really a very limited temperature range, because once we get colder than about 0 degrees Fahrenheit, then clouds become naturally very efficient at producing ice already. And adding more ice nuclei or silver iodide to the clouds doesn't necessarily produce any more ice.
Thank you. A follow-up.
Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Mr. French, thank you for being here. Very fascinating testimony. You mentioned earlier in response to Representative Campbell's question about the idea that maybe there's more contrails we see now today, and you mentioned the explanation you offered was possibly that more aircraft activity, which I just wanted to clarify that when you mean aircraft activity, you're not talking about cloud seeding. You're talking about the normal commercial, other types of aircraft that basically operate private aircraft in our airspace. Is that what you were talking about when you said increased aircraft activity?
Mr. French. Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, yes, that is exactly. Please note, though, that's a guess, right? I have no evidence that there is, more natural commercial or private aircraft activity. It's simply a guess.
Thank you, Mr. French, for your
One
follow-up.
Yeah. For that last statement, do you also have any kind of scientific knowledge or that there is more contrails than there has been in the past? I mean, is that an assumption that we're making, or that's some people's kind of conclusion? Or is there some evidence that you know of to support that idea, that there's more contrails?
Mr. French.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, I have no evidence. I'm not aware of any evidence of more contrails. That's not to say that it doesn't exist. It's just kind of outside of my area of professional expertise.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. French, for your testimony. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this bill?
Good morning, Vice Chairman Tarver, members of the committee. I'm mindful of the time, so I'll be as short and brief as possible. My name is Jody Levin. I'm here on behalf of your Trona industry. As was referenced earlier, the Wyoming Mining Association does support financially the cloud seeding program for the Wind River and Green River Basin. Those are your Trona and soda ash companies. We do that arrangement through the Mining Association, honestly, just for an efficiency of billing standpoint. But those companies are industrial users in the Colorado Basin. They are junior users on the river, and they are very concerned with the potential curtailment. So they support cloud seeding for the sole reason of any tool in the toolbox to increase water moisture is important.
Thank you. Committee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the bill? Please come on up. Please proceed.
Good morning. I'm Nancy McCann, and I am here.
Is the green light on?
Yeah,
This? Okay.
I think it's on. Can you hear me okay?
There you go.
Okay. I'm Nancy McCann, and I'm here as a private individual, not representing anybody but myself and my family. I happen to own 15 acres located within the Sierra Madres and have been going to the Sierra Madres for over 51 years. And yes, I am older than you think. So having said that, I have seen the Sierra Madres with little snow and a lot of snow. And on May 27th, when my son recently skied up to the top where we have our cabin, he experienced that there was at least 12 feet of snow because our cabin is pretty high. It's a double-decker. And the snow was, he had to dig in to even try to get in because it went up to the second level. And so having said that, I totally support the cloud seeding, even though it limits us from going up to the cabin just to 3 months out of the year. But we feel safe that cloud seeding is occurring. We will continue to go up there. And one thing I did forget to mention is that I did work for the state engineer's office for over 40 years. And so long-term employee, and I do know that water is an important thing. So I totally support any way we can help that. And cloud seeding is how it has occurred, and it does benefit. And one thing for sure, during the whole course of the 51 years that we have been going up there, I have seen the DEQ do their job and check the water testing on these rivers. And that's just as a private individual. And I do also know that there are irrigators where the water comes off of the mountain and takes it further down off of the Belvedere ditch. And so it works, it helps, and I trust the DEQ to do what they need to do, and as well as the water development for their cloud seeding program. And I would hope that the committee would entertain being able to do some additional research before terminating anything to do with cloud seeding. So
Thank you, Ms. McCann.
thank you so much.
Okay, anyone else?
Chairman Riggins.
Mr. Riggins, please.
Is the witness still there?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for being there. I wanted to, so do you think that there's a broad range of geoengineering being discussed here? It seems to me that we have to carve out that program for all the ones that we don't even know if they're going on, or we don't know what components or emissions are being emitted from the ones I think people are wondering about and unknown. So I think, do you think that would be helpful for this discussion if cloud seeding almost became a separate entity in this discussion? Because we have monitoring, we have ways to measure things in that particular field, and then focus our other attention on trying to find out what other types of emissions that are aerosolized from atmosphere or should be our concern. What do you think?
Ms. McCann.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Riggins, I'm certainly not a scientist, but anytime you can get any type of scientific information to help make better decisions, it's always a good idea. And so I just know that personally, I trust, this is an odd statement you're going to hear from me because I worked for government. I do trust the government to help us go through a process to gain more information, provide us that information in order to be better decision makers and make better laws. And so I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you.
That's as good as I can get for right now.
Okay, but thank you for your testimony.
Thank you,
Kimberly, we are running out of time. Mark, do we have anyone online?
We do, we have 3.
Yeah, I guess they'll have 1 minute each. Mark, please admit them.
Okay. We'll start with Patrick Hagan.
Mr. Hagan, can you hear us?
I can, yes.
Sir, I'm sorry we have to cut you short, but you've got 1 minute.
Understood, okay. Sorry, just trying to get Zoom working here. Can you guys hear and see me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, to the chair and everybody else present, thank you. So yeah, there's clearly needs to be a distinction between cloud seeding and atmospheric geoengineering, stratospheric aerosol injection programs. If you talk to most of your constituents, the latter is what people are actually concerned about. People are not really concerned about cloud seeding. Big difference between the two. To the lab testing, what we are looking for, most people, as well as myself, would be total metals precipitation tests, as was previously discussed. Transmission electron microscopy could be really helpful in the speciation and morphology of these particles, which we would like to have investigated. For any of that, my personal recommendation would be work with the University of Wyoming that already has this equipment. To my mind, there's no reason to go and spend millions of dollars on lab testing equipment just for the sole purpose of doing this. You have a state-funded institution that already has these capabilities. My recommendation would be to use that and not waste any taxpayer dollars. And then if you look at Section 4 of the bill, there is language in there exempting all existing contracts. My recommendation would be to remove that last little bit at the end, where it says, talking about the agreements entered in before the effective date of this bill. My recommendation would be get rid of that last little bit. Any publicly disclosed and acknowledged agreements on cloud seeding, I think, should be subject to exemption from this bill. Again, that's not what most people are really concerned about here.
Thank you, Patrick, for your testimony. We have to move to our next.
Maria Chrysler.
Ms. Chrysler, please go ahead.
Thank you. I wish I had more than 1 minute. I'm here to testify on the health aspects. I actually do have a scanning electron microscope, so I have ample evidence demonstrating that what we're talking about here with the so-called silver iodide crystals or particulates are exactly the opposite of what I have found in our snow, falling from our fog, also tested in the blood and urine of Wyoming constituents. So I can demonstrate all of this. I went ahead and sent in a summary email to each one of the panelists or of the representatives so that you have this. And I'm happy to send you a summary over of the toxicity and the evidence of bioaccumulation of these different particulates and what they're doing to children and the people in the state of Wyoming. So that work has already been done, and it was done by me for free.
Ms. Chrysler, thank you for your testimony, and I'm sorry we don't have more time.
Sure.
Pardon me, Shelta Ramber.
Ms. Ramber, please.
Hello, thank you. I will be quick. I'm Shelta Ramber of Sheridan. I represent myself. I emphatically support House Bill 208, and I urge you to do the same. We're talking about chemtrails, not contrails. This issue is often cloaked in language of progress and salvation and has innocent titles, but they have major consequences. Geoengineering is dangerous and messes with God's creation. The knowledge of how the daily exposure of chemicals is finally becoming mainstream because of the work of Make America Healthy Again. Spraying chemicals in the sky disrupts the natural weather systems, leading to altered patterns, including drought. The spraying of heavy metals into the atmosphere has direct impacts on human health. I, for one, get more migraines when the white lines become man-made clouds above me. I live nowhere near where this cloud seeding is happening, but yet there are white lines always, I would say probably every other week in the sky that turn into man-made clouds. Behavior in children, cognitive decline in children, these are all because of heavy metals. Please vote yes. Thank you.
Ms. Ramber, thank you for your testimony. Does that bring us to a closing on?
We have no more.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Committee, what's your pleasure? Oh, we will be closing public testimony at this time, and committee, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I would move to table this bill with your concurrence as the second, and possibly move it to interim for a more defined study on what we're talking about as an issue, as well as, I think, the health issues of silver iodine on our wildlife population. That's of interest to me because this has gone on for so long, and I don't know if that has been studied, but that would be my motion.
And, Mr. Chairman, and
Representative?
I would second Representative Knapp's,
Looks
and
like we have
hopefully
plenty of
put it as a
seconds.
priority. Oh, okay, sorry.
Mark, did you get that? Okay, so I guess we vote on the motion. Everyone in favor of tabling the bill, say aye.
Aye.
Everyone opposed? I'd say that passed. Thank you, committee, and I'd say we are adjourned.